The 1850s and 60s were a troubled time in American history, with slavery and tensions between the northern states and southern states, allowing Abraham Lincoln to step up and play a role in the ending of slavery. Abraham Lincoln is one of the most well-known and influential men in American history. His impact and influence on American history is still present to this day, whether it was his passing of the Emancipation Proclamation, his stance on slavery that helped the Union win the war, or his beliefs and ideas leading to the passing of the 13th Amendment following his assassination. Lincoln's impact shaped the equality and the unionization of today's America. In the beginning of his presidency, Abraham Lincoln only cared about saving the Union, not freeing the slaves. Likewise, many Northerners, despite the groups of abolitionists, did not care about ending slavery, but simply to halt its expansion. He was not officially inaugurated until March 4, 1861. It was one of the most memorable elections, with more than 80% of voters voting, and Lincoln was not even on the ballot in some southern states. As president, there was some confusion as to which governmental party Lincoln would fit into. He seemed to fit Democratic, but despite his religious upbringing, was not considered religious enough for their party. Having grown up around slaves, but being raised in an anti-slavery home, Lincoln ended up joining the Whigs, which were similar to the Republicans and had an anti-slavery stance, rather than the Democratic Party, whose stance on slavery varied from state to state. In his inauguration, Lincoln stated that he had no intention of ending slavery, as he did not feel that it was his constitutional right to do so. However, Lincoln realized that the tolerance did not seem to serve a constructive political purpose after a while, and the Emancipation Proclamation transformed from a possibility into a probability. He had promised that he would not interfere with slavery and was reluctant to adopt abolitionist policies for many reasons. Not only was he worried that if he ended slavery, there would be terrible consequences of setting nearly 4 million African Americans into society, but that border states surrounding Washington, D.C., such as Maryland, Kentucky, and Delaware, would leave the Union and enter Southern Confederacy. This frightened Lincoln, because if he lost the border states, the Confederacy would not only outnumber the Union, but would also have states that surrounded Washington, D.C., which would make it nearly impossible for Lincoln to succeed in the war. Lincoln's ultimate aim was to save the Union. He sent a letter to Horace Greeley, the editor of the New York Tribune, on August 2, 1862, stating his stance on slavery. He said, "If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. If I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that." Within a month and a half of his election, his presidency initiated a rebellion based on his anti-slavery stance, which caused the formation of the Confederacy and eventually leading to the Civil War. The Civil War is one of the most fatal and violent wars fought on American soil, with families fighting and killing each other. 3 years into the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln wrote a letter stating, "I am naturally anti-slavery. If slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong. I cannot remember when I did not so think and feel." He felt that America was not following the Constitution by keeping slavery alive, and said that the war, things would be different. In one of his most notorious speeches on the battlegrounds of Gettysburg, he said, "It is rather for us, the living, we here be dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that these honored dead we take increased devotion to this cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve these dead shall not have died in vain, that the nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from this earth. That the nation shall have a new birth." This is a powerful statement that implies the freedom for all including slaves, and that the people needed to focus on what happened after the war and how the government would return to a government that was run by the people and for the people. Although Lincoln strongly disagreed with slavery, he was hesitant to take an abolitionist stance. Possibly his single most important and influential act during his 5 years in the Oval Office was the passing of the Emancipation Proclamation. The proclamation had many good values, but like most things, it had its bad as well. Passing the Emancipation Proclamation would strengthen the North and was the root of the rebellion, but Lincoln was hesitant to pass it because it may cause border states to join the Confederate Army, as well as possibly showing a sign of weakness to the rest of the world. His biggest moral dilemma that caused the postponing of the emancipation is that he had promised in his inaugural speech to not interfere with slavery. Lincoln struggled with these decisions for the early parts of his presidency and the Civil War, but decided to pass it in September of 1862 after the Union victory at the Battle of Antietam. This changed the reason of the war from secession to human rights, giving the Union the upper hand. After he was elected for a second term, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated within the first few months, but his death did not occur in vain, as his influence on the American people led to the passing of the 13th Amendment. Despite strong belief and no false effort by Abraham Lincoln, the Emancipation Proclamation did not actually free any slaves. The Southern states did not see Abraham Lincoln as their president. Therefore, the Union Army could not enforce the new policies. There was, however, an immediate impact in the Union. It did more than just state a war for human freedom. It allowed the Union to recruit black soldiers. As a result, nearly 180,000 former slaves enlisted into the Union Army, which had a major role for the Union's victory. This caused the South to concentrate more resources on controlling slaves, which took away their concentration on the war. The Southern struggle after its passing locked up the world's cotton source. The stall in cotton made the Southern states feel that England and France would help, but their policy on slavery made European help impossible. Lincoln wrote a letter to James C. Conkling that stated the emancipation policy and the use of colored troops constitute the heaviest blow yet dealt to the rebellion. Abraham Lincoln felt that it was the greatest event in the 19th century and the central act of his administration, as well as the final blow to slavery. This opened the door for the 13th Amendment to be passed, which was well on its way before Abraham Lincoln was shot in Ford's Theater in April of 1865. Despite the creation of the 13th Amendment, after Lincoln's death, it made tensions even worse between the North and the South after the war. The Union wanted the South to pay entirely for the Reconstruction post-Civil War, and any sympathy showed to the South was hated. Abraham Lincoln lives today in history as one of the greatest American presidents. His strong beliefs and stances led to the eradication of slavery and the recreation of America based on the Constitution and freedom for all. His passing of the Emancipation Proclamation, ideas leading to the 13th Amendment, and his strong stance against slavery shaped the rights and freedoms of America today. If he had not been as brave to stand up against the Confederacy and slavery, or if he had lost the 1861 election, the freedom of slaves and equal rights may have been postponed for many more years than it already was.